You are Locked On Syracuse, your daily podcast on the Syracuse Orange. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Adrian Autry and Alex Klein, they mentioned in the State of the Union address last week that there are no rankings for grading returning production here. And those two main returners for Syracuse basketball are, of course, J.J. Starling and Donnie Freeman. And hey, they mentioned in that interview that basically any school in the country would covet players like those two. So how important was it for Syracuse this offseason to keep J.J. Starling and Donnie Freeman in the picture?
Well, Jackson, as always, thanks for having me on, brother. From the roster from this past year, obviously, not factoring guys who have exhausted their eligibility, or although some of the guys who I thought had are in the transfer portal, but that's a whole nother topic of conversation. But the guys that have eligibility left, those are the two main guys that Syracuse needed to keep, from my perspective. J.J. Starling, he missed a handful of games, and obviously Donnie only played in 14, but Donnie averaged 13 and 7. And in the state of the program, and of course I'm having like a senior moment now, but they listed like the only freshmen at Syracuse who have ever averaged at least 13 and 7 or something like that. And it was like Donnie, Mello, O'Shea Brissett, and maybe Dante Green. It was a short list.
It was like 4 or 5 players.
Yeah, I might be missing one, or if I goofed one, my bad. But the point is that even though he only played in 14 games, he clearly has potential, and as a scorer, a rebounder. Certainly, him and everyone else on the team was not very good on defense. But that's again, not necessarily just picking on him. The whole team stunk on defense, but and he can shoot the three, and he's athletic, and him coming back. It's funny, and I think you and I have talked about it in the past, but so many people after he got injured, and then it was like, is he coming back this season? Like, it was I don't think this SU Athletics, like in the program itself, like was super transparent about Donnie, but so many people on social media, oh, he's hitting the portal if he doesn't go to the NBA, and I don't think he was going to be an NBA prospect after only playing 14 games. But I wrote that I was optimistic he'd return because he has such a close relationship with multiple coaches, given, he's from from Washington, D.C., the DMV, and Brennan Strawn and Autry in particular, that's their like recruiting, mecca, having both been coaches there, at high school level and the grassroots level. So I wasn't surprised that I was glad to see Donnie returning, but I wasn't super surprised. But in terms of Starling, he's one of the top scoring guards in the ACC and even around the country. And, he's still not a great 3-point shooter. And I like him better at the 2 spot than the 1. I know he's a combo. I mean, he can play, point guard some, but I like him more at the 2. So to get back to your question, I think retaining those 2 guys over anyone else on the team that, was an underclassman, so to speak, that was vital. And, I think it was Alex Klein that said, if they went on the open market, they'd command a lot of dollars, blah, 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 which probably is true. And, I don't think Syracuse is in the top tier in terms of NIL, but I think they're relatively competitive. But I think either Klein or Autry, obviously, since it was the 2 of them in the thing, one of them said that NIL wasn't like the determining factor for anyone that's going to be on the roster for next year. I could be paraphrasing it. And
you are paraphrasing it.
I don't want to misquote, right. But he was in essence, at least what I gleaned from it, is that he was saying, guys are getting paid, sure, but like it just wasn't the main reason or the only reason. Is that true or not? I have no idea. I'll take him for his word. But yeah, keeping those 2 guys. I mean, they had 12 scholarship players last year, and it's only 2 come back. I mean, it's crazy just the way the landscape is, but that's happening all over the country. But I mean, would I have been fine with other guys returning? Sure. I think, and it sounds like we're going to get into this maybe a little bit more, but I mean, I think the roster on paper looks better than last year for numerous reasons. I think they're going to be better on defense. But yeah, you can't overstate how important, from my perspective, it was to get JJ and Donnie both to come back. Would you agree?
Yeah, I would agree. I think it was super important. And they were really, if you go back to earlier in this offseason, they were really the only two players that Syracuse needed to come back.
Right.
Everyone else, I remember saying it on the podcast. We had conversations about it too here on the podcast as well. Like everyone else can kind of just go. If they go, I mean, I'm not going to bat an eye over it. I'm really not going to care all that much if they decide to leave. Like good for them, I guess. Go find somewhere else and good luck on the rest of your career. But
absolutely, yeah.
You can't have the same coaching staff and the same roster next season and expect different results, right? Even if everyone is fully healthy for the entire year.
Right.
So the only two guys they really had to get back were JJ Starling and Donnie Freeman. They're not perfect players. Like I think that needs to be stated here. They're not perfect. JJ Starling still is not a good outside shooter, and I'll believe it when I see it if he actually starts hitting a three-pointer at a relatively decent rate for an entire year. And Donnie Freeman, I think, needs to put on more muscle and also needs to get better on defense. Same with JJ Starling as regarding the defense. But as far as making the NCAA tournament, which is the elephant in the room, you needed to get back these two guys because had Syracuse lost them, they're not building a tournament roster in the portal. Like they're just not. They would have no chance of being able to replace that production in the transfer portal. So good on Syracuse for being able to keep the two guys that they absolutely had to keep in JJ Starling and Donnie Freeman.